My name is Rachel Martinez, and I am 26 years old. I never thought the worst betrayal of my life would come from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. For years, I had been the invisible daughter in my own family, watching from the sidelines as my parents showered attention on my siblings while treating me like a convenient ATM. But when they used my own money to fund a luxury vacation I was deliberately excluded from, I finally decided it was time to show them what happens when you push someone too far. Before I dive into this story, let me know in the comments if you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, and don't forget to hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with respect by their loved ones. Growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, I was the classic middle child in the Martinez family. My older sister, Sophia, now 29, was the artistic one, the free spirit who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She was pursuing her dreams as a photographer, which meant she was constantly broke but always supported emotionally and financially by our parents. My younger brother, Miguel, 22, was the baby of the family, the charming one who could talk his way out of any situation and had never held a steady job for more than 6 months. Then there was me, the responsible one, the one who had worked part-time jobs since I was 16, who had put herself through college with minimal help from our parents, who had built a successful career as a marketing manager at a tech company in downtown Phoenix. I was the one who always had her life together, which apparently meant I didn't need the same love and support my siblings received so freely. Our mother, Carmen Martinez, had always been obsessed with appearances. She ran a small boutique in Scottsdale and considered herself something of a local influencer with her perfectly curated Instagram feed. Every family gathering was a photo opportunity. Every achievement by Sophia or Miguel was broadcast to her followers with professional quality photos and heartfelt captions. My accomplishments, however, were either ignored entirely or mentioned in passing with a generic "proud of all my kids" post that featured a group photo where I was barely visible. Dad, Eduardo Martinez, owned a small construction company and had always been the type of man who showed love through providing rather than expressing emotion. He had worked hard his entire life to give his family a comfortable middle-class lifestyle, but somehow his definition of providing seemed to apply more to Sophia and Miguel than to me. When Sophia needed money for art supplies or Miguel needed help with rent, Dad was always there with his wallet. When I had needed help with college expenses, I was told it would be good for me to learn financial responsibility. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had become the family's unofficial financial backup system. Over the past 3 years, I had gradually taken on more and more of my family's expenses without really noticing how it had happened. It started small, covering dinner when we went out because Sophia was between galleries or Miguel was starting a new job next week. Then it became picking up larger expenses when emergencies arose. I had moved into a beautiful apartment in North Phoenix 2 years ago, complete with a view of the mountains and a pool that I had worked 60-hour weeks to afford. When I had invited my family over for a housewarming party, Dad had commented that I was wasting money on luxuries while Mom had spent the entire evening taking photos of Sophia posing by my pool for her social media. The caption read, "My beautiful daughter living her best life," without mentioning that it was my apartment, my pool, my achievement. The financial entanglement had deepened after Dad had a minor accident on a job site last year. Nothing serious, but it had scared all of us and made me realize how financially vulnerable my parents were. I had suggested setting up a joint emergency fund, just in case something more serious happened. Dad had grumbled about not needing charity, but Mom had praised me for being so thoughtful and responsible. I had opened the account with $10,000 of my own money and added both parents as authorized users. The idea was that they could access funds immediately if there was a medical emergency or major home repair. I also set up automatic transfers to add $500 monthly to the account, money that came directly from my salary. It was a significant expense for me, but family was family and I wanted them to be protected. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly that emergency fund would become a general expense account. There was Mom's car repair that couldn't wait for next payday. Dad's tool replacement after his truck was broken into. Sophia's camera equipment when she had a once-in-a-lifetime photography opportunity. Miguel's rent when he got fired from yet another job. Each time, they assured me it was temporary, that they would pay it back, but the money never materialized. I had also somehow become responsible for their cell phone plan. It had started when they were struggling to pay their bill one month, and I had offered to help temporarily. 3 years later, I was still paying $180 monthly for their premium unlimited plan. I covered Sophia's car insurance because she couldn't afford it as a struggling artist, and I paid for various streaming services that Miguel used primarily for gaming and entertainment. Looking back, I had been slowly conditioned to accept financial responsibility without emotional reciprocation. I was the reliable daughter who would always be there with a solution, but I was also the one who was consistently overlooked, underappreciated, and taken for granted. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was working late on a campaign launch for a major client when my phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat. Mom had sent a message that would change everything. Exciting news, everyone. Dad and I are planning a special trip to Costa Rica for our 30th anniversary. 2 weeks in paradise this May. Beaches, rainforest, family time. Can't wait to celebrate with our babies. I stared at the message, immediately feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. A family trip to Costa Rica sounded amazing, but it also sounded expensive. My first thought was about the cost: airfare, hotels, meals, activities. My second thought was about work. May was going to be a busy month with several major campaigns launching. But my third thought was about connection. Maybe this was exactly what our family needed. I quickly opened my calendar app and started calculating vacation days. I had been saving up time off, specifically for something like this. The group chat was already exploding with enthusiasm. Sophia had sent a string of tropical emojis and was already talking about the photography opportunities. Miguel was researching adventure tours and zip-lining experiences. Even Dad, who rarely participated in group texts, had written, looking forward to it. I typed back, "This sounds amazing. What are the dates? I need to request time off and look into flights." I hit send and waited for the response that would let me start planning. But my message seemed to disappear into the digital void. The conversation continued around me, Sophia discussing packing lists, Miguel sharing links to adventure activities, Mom researching restaurants. It was as if I hadn't spoken at all. After an hour of being ignored, I tried again. "Mom, can you send me the specific dates and hotel information? I want to book my flight soon." This time, Mom responded, "Oh, sweetie, let me call you later. I'm researching hotels right now." That phone call never came. When I texted her the next day, she said she was still working out the details and would let me know soon. By the end of the week, I was starting to feel uneasy. Every time I brought up the Costa Rica trip, I got vague responses about still planning and working out logistics. The following Sunday, I drove to my parents' house for our usual family dinner. The moment I walked through the door, I could feel the excited energy in the air. Sophia was showing Mom tropical outfits she had ordered online. Miguel was talking about surf lessons he wanted to take. Dad was studying a guidebook about Costa Rican wildlife. "So," I said during a lull in the conversation, "have you finalized the Costa Rica dates yet? I really need to request time off tomorrow." The room went uncomfortably quiet. Mom and Dad exchanged a look that I couldn't quite interpret. Sophia suddenly became very interested in her phone. Miguel cleared his throat and mumbled something about checking on dinner in the kitchen. "Well," Mom began, her voice taking on that artificially sweet tone she used when she was about to deliver bad news, "we've been talking about the arrangements, and it's a bit complicated." "Complicated how?" I asked, though I was already starting to understand. "The resort we're looking at has limited availability," Dad said gruffly. "And it's quite expensive. We're trying to keep costs reasonable." "I can pay for myself," I said quickly. "I've been saving up vacation money. Cost isn't an issue." "It's not just about money," Mom continued. "It's about fit. You know how you're about planning and schedules. This is supposed to be a relaxing trip." I felt like I'd been slapped. How I am about planning. I like to be organized. That's not a character flaw. "You're just very intense about things," Sophia chimed in, not looking up from her phone. "Remember last Christmas, when you made that itinerary for the day? It was a lot." "I was trying to help make sure we could fit in everything everyone wanted to do," I said defensively. "See? That's exactly what we mean," Mom said, reaching over to pat my hand condescendingly. You turn everything into a project. We want this trip to be spontaneous and fun. I looked around the table at my family, trying to process what I was hearing. So, you're not inviting me because you think I'm too organized? It's not that we're not inviting you, Dad said uncomfortably. It's just that we've already made arrangements for the 4 of us, and changing them now would be complicated. 4 of us? I asked. Who's the 4th person? Another uncomfortable silence. Finally, Miguel spoke up. Sophia is bringing Derek. Derek was Sophia's boyfriend of about 6 months. I had met him exactly twice. So there's room for Derek, but not for me? Derek is practically family, Mom said defensively. And Sophia asked if she could bring him months ago. I didn't know we were planning this months ago, I said, my voice rising slightly. I thought this was a recent decision. Well, we've been talking about it for a while, Dad said evasively. I felt a cold realization wash over me. How long have you been planning this? Does it matter? Sophia asked, still not looking at me. The point is, the arrangements are made now. Actually, it does matter, I said, standing up from the table. Because it sounds like you've been planning this family trip for months without including me in the conversation, and now you're telling me there's no room for me but plenty of room for Derek. Don't be dramatic, Mom said. It's not personal. How is excluding me from a family trip not personal? I asked. You're always working anyway, Miguel said. You probably couldn't get the time off. I stared at him. Did you ask me? Did anyone ask me if I was available or interested? The silence that followed was answer enough. I'm going to go, I said, grabbing my purse. Thank you for dinner. Sweetie, don't leave angry, Mom called after me. We can talk about this. But I was already walking toward the door. I needed to get out of there before I said something I would regret. On the drive home, I replayed the conversation over and over in my mind. The casual cruelty of it was stunning. They had been planning this trip for months, without including me. They had made it clear that Derek, someone who was barely part of our family, was more welcome than I was. And they had justified it by painting me as some kind of controlling, work-obsessed person who would ruin their fun. The next few weeks were tense. I didn't bring up the Costa Rica trip again, and neither did anyone else. The family group chat continued to buzz with excitement about their upcoming adventure, but I had muted the notifications. I couldn't handle seeing their enthusiasm for a trip I had been deliberately excluded from. 3 weeks before their departure, I made a decision that would change everything. I was reviewing my finances, preparing for a major purchase, when I decided to check the emergency fund account. I hadn't looked at it in a while, trusting that it was being used responsibly for actual emergencies. What I found made my blood run cold. The account, which should have had nearly $15,000 in it, was down to $2,847. I scrolled through the transaction history, my heart sinking with each entry. There were charges to a travel agency, hotel reservations, airline tickets, restaurant meals that were clearly from their pre-trip planning dinners. They had used my emergency fund to plan and pay for the Costa Rica trip, the trip I had been excluded from. The trip they had told me was too expensive and complicated to include me in. I sat staring at my laptop screen, unable to process what I was seeing. Not only had they deliberately excluded me from their family vacation, but they had used my own money to pay for it. Money I had saved specifically for their emergencies, money that came directly from my salary every month. I called my bank immediately and requested a complete transaction history for the account. The representative emailed me a detailed breakdown that painted an even worse picture. Over the past 6 months, they had withdrawn over $12,000 from the emergency fund. Some of it had gone to actual emergencies, Mom's car repair, Dad's medical bills from a routine procedure. But a significant portion had gone to vacation planning, entertainment, and general living expenses. The Costa Rica trip alone had cost $6,800 so far, and they hadn't even left yet. I was shaking with anger and betrayal. They had looked me in the eye and told me there was no room for me on this trip, while using my own money to fund it. They had made me feel like I was being unreasonable for wanting to be included while secretly planning to exclude me all along. I called my best friend, Maya, who listened to the entire story with growing outrage. "Rachel, this is beyond messed up," she said when I finished. "They're not just excluding you, they're financially exploiting you." "But they're my family," I said, the same excuse I had been making for years. "Family doesn't treat family like this," Maya said firmly. "You need to do something about this." "Like what?" "Like protecting yourself. You have every right to control that account. It's your money." That night, I lay awake thinking about Maya's words. I had spent years making excuses for my family's behavior, telling myself that families weren't perfect, that love came in different forms. But this wasn't love. This was exploitation disguised as family obligation. The next morning, I logged into my online banking and navigated to the joint account settings. I found the option to freeze the account, preventing any further transactions until I unfroze it. My finger hovered over the button for a long time. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to cut off my family's access to money while they were about to leave for their dream vacation? I thought about all the times I had been overlooked, dismissed, or excluded. I thought about working 60-hour weeks to afford my apartment while they criticized my spending. I thought about paying for their phones, their insurance, their emergencies, their luxuries, all while being treated like an afterthought. At 11:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, I pressed the freeze button. The first decline transaction alert came at 2:15 p.m. Transaction declined, $347.89 at Costa Rica Travel Services. I was in a meeting with my marketing team when my phone buzzed with a notification. I silenced it and continued presenting our Q2 campaign strategy. By 5 p.m., I had received 6 more decline notifications. Attempts to pay for airport parking, meal reservations, and what looked like last-minute travel insurance. Each decline transaction felt like a small victory, validation that I was finally standing up for myself. I deliberately ignored the flood of missed calls and text messages that began around 3 p.m. I could see the family group chat exploding with increasingly frantic messages, but I didn't read them. Instead, I stayed late at the office, focusing on work with unusual clarity and purpose. At 7 p.m., I finally looked at my phone. 17 missed calls from Mom, 12 from Dad, 8 from Sophia, and even 3 from Miguel, who never called me unless he needed money. The text messages were a mix of confusion, anger, and desperation. "Mom, sweetie, our card isn't working. Can you call the bank?" "Dad, Rachel, I need you to call me immediately. There's a problem with the account." "Sophia, what did you do to the emergency fund? We can't pay for anything." "Miguel, this is really messed up, Rachel." They're freaking out. I turned off my phone and drove home in peaceful silence. For the first time in years, I wasn't anxious about my family's reaction to something I had done. I wasn't worried about their feelings or their problems. I was just calm. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony overlooking the Phoenix skyline. The city lights twinkled below as I contemplated what I had done. I had finally drawn a line in the sand, finally said enough to years of being taken for granted. My phone had been buzzing constantly, but I had left it inside. Whatever crisis they were experiencing, whatever drama was unfolding, it wasn't my immediate problem to solve. For once, they would have to figure things out without me. I went to bed early and slept better than I had in months. The next morning brought a new level of desperation. I had turned my phone back on to find 43 missed calls and dozens of text messages. The family group chat looked like a war zone of panic and accusation. I decided it was time to engage, but on my terms. I called Mom first. "Rachel," she answered on the first ring, her voice high with stress. "Thank God you're calling. We don't know what's wrong with the bank account. They keep declining our card." "There's nothing wrong with the account," I said calmly. "I froze it." Silence. "Then, you what?" "I froze the account. I discovered you've been using my emergency fund to pay for the Costa Rica trip." That's not. We were going to pay it back," she stammered. "With what money, Mom? You've never paid back any of the loans I've given you before." "Those weren't loans, they were family help," she said defensively. And what is this? I asked. You used my money to pay for a vacation I was deliberately excluded from. How is that family help? We didn't exclude you deliberately, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. You planned this trip for months without including me in the conversation. You told me there was no room for me, but plenty of room for Derek. You used my emergency fund to pay for it. How is that not deliberate exclusion? I could hear muffled voices in the background, Dad and Sophia arguing about something. We leave tomorrow, Mom said, her voice breaking. We can't cancel everything now. We'll lose all the money. You mean you'll lose all of my money? I corrected. Please, Rachel. We're begging you. We'll pay you back, I promise. I had heard that promise so many times before. I want to talk to everyone together. Put me on speaker. After some shuffling, I heard Dad's voice. Rachel, this is ridiculous. You're ruining our trip over a misunderstanding. What part is the misunderstanding, Dad? The part where you used my money, or the part where you excluded me? We didn't exclude you, Sophia's voice chimed in. We just thought you wouldn't want to come. Did you ask me? Silence. Did anyone ask me if I wanted to come on this family trip? More silence. I'll unfreeze the account, I said finally, but I have conditions. What conditions? Dad asked warily. First, when you get back, we have an honest family meeting about how I've been treated. No deflecting, no minimizing, no making excuses. Just honest acknowledgement. Fine, Mom said quickly. Second, we establish clear financial boundaries going forward. I'm not funding vacations, daily expenses, or luxuries anymore. The emergency fund is for actual emergencies only. That's fair, Dad admitted grudgingly. And third, I want an apology. A real one. Not a sorry you feel that way apology, but an acknowledgement that you excluded me and used my money without permission. We're sorry, Mom said immediately. I'm sorry too, Sophia added, sounding genuinely remorseful for the first time. Me too, Miguel said quietly. Dad was silent for a long moment. Then, I'm sorry, Rachel. We didn't think about how this would affect you. It wasn't perfect, but it was more acknowledgement than I had ever received from them before. I'll unfreeze enough for your trip, I said. But when you get back, things are going to be different. After calculating their remaining expenses, I unfroze the account and transferred an additional $3,000 to cover their trip. Not a penny more than necessary. The next day, I watched their social media posts from their departure with a mixture of sadness and relief. They looked happy and excited, boarding their plane to Costa Rica. For the first time, I didn't feel the usual pang of exclusion. Instead, I felt free. Over the next 2 weeks, I enjoyed the most peaceful time I had experienced in years. Without the constant background stress of family drama, I threw myself into work with renewed energy. I started a new fitness routine, reconnected with friends I had neglected, and even went on a few dates. I also used the time to reflect on our family dynamics and prepare for the conversation we would have when they returned. I made lists of specific incidents, patterns of behavior, and changes I wanted to see. I practiced setting boundaries and sticking to them. The reckoning came 2 days after their return. We met at my parents' house on a Sunday evening. The atmosphere was tense, but different from usual. There was an acknowledgement in the air that something fundamental had shifted. I want to start by saying that I love all of you, I began. But love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. What happened with the Costa Rica trip was the culmination of years of feeling excluded, overlooked, and taken for granted. I went through my prepared points systematically. The financial exploitation, the emotional exclusion, the casual dismissal of my feelings and needs. I gave specific examples, dates, and amounts. I had no idea it was this bad, Dad said quietly when I finished. I feel terrible, Mom added, tears in her eyes. I never meant to make you feel unwanted. But you did, I said gently. Your intentions don't negate the impact of your actions. Sophia surprised me by speaking up next. I've been thinking about this since we talked before the trip. I realized that I've been so focused on my own struggles that I never considered how hard you've been working to support all of us. I always assumed you were fine, Miguel added. You're so successful and independent. I didn't realize you needed the same support from us that we needed from you." The conversation continued for 3 hours. There were tears, raised voices, and uncomfortable truths. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was being heard by my family. We established new boundaries that night. I would no longer pay for their regular expenses. They would take over their own phone plan, insurance, and streaming services. The emergency fund would be truly for emergencies only, with clear definitions of what qualified. And most importantly, I would be included in family decisions and events as an equal member, not an afterthought. It wasn't a magic fix. Change is slow and sometimes painful. There were relapses, moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer the forgotten daughter who existed to solve everyone else's problems. I was Rachel, a person with her own needs, feelings, and boundaries. 6 months later, when Mom suggested a family trip to the Grand Canyon, I was included in the planning from the very beginning. We discussed dates, accommodations, and activities together. When it came time to book, everyone paid their own way. The trip was wonderful. For the first time in my life, I felt like a full participant in my family rather than an accessory. We hiked together, ate together, and laughed together. Sophia took beautiful photos of all of us, and when Mom posted them on social media, I was prominently featured with a caption that read, "Grateful for my incredible daughter Rachel, who taught us that family means including everyone, not just when it's convenient." Standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, watching the sunrise paint the rocks in brilliant colors, I realized that freezing that bank account had been the best decision I had ever made. Not because it punished my family, but because it forced all of us to confront the dysfunction we had been living with for years. Family relationships are complicated, messy, and deeply ingrained. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen without conflict. But sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable unhealthy patterns, even when it's difficult. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. That demanding respect doesn't make you difficult, it makes you human. And that sometimes, the people who love you most are the ones who need to learn how to treat you better. My family isn't perfect. We still have our moments of tension and misunderstanding. But we also have something we didn't have before: honesty, respect, and genuine inclusion. And that makes all the difference. If you're reading this and recognizing your own family dynamics, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve to be valued, respected, and included. You deserve to have your feelings acknowledged and your boundaries respected. And you have the power to demand those things, even from the people who are supposed to love you most. Setting boundaries with family is never easy, but it's sometimes necessary. The temporary discomfort of conflict is worth the long-term benefit of healthier relationships. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Your worth isn't determined by how much you give or how little you ask for in return. You are valuable simply because you exist, and any family worth having will recognize and honor that value. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did they react, and was it worth it in the end? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember to like this video if my story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics and personal growth, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is stand up for yourself, especially to the people you love most. I thought my story had ended with that Grand Canyon trip, but life has a way of testing the boundaries you've worked so hard to establish. 3 months after our family healing trip, I would face the ultimate test of whether our new dynamic was truly sustainable or just a temporary fix. It started with a phone call from Miguel on a rainy Tuesday evening in November. I was at home, reviewing quarterly reports for work, when my phone rang. Seeing his name on the screen immediately put me on alert. Miguel only called when he needed something. "Hey Rachel," he said, his voice unusually subdued. "Do you have a minute to talk?" "Of course. What's going on?" "I got laid off today," he said quietly. "The whole marketing department at the startup got cut. They said it was budget constraints, but I think it was performance-related, I felt a familiar surge of protective instinct mixed with wariness.
I'm sorry, Miguel.
That's really tough. How are you handling it? Not great, honestly. I've got rent due next week, and my savings are basically non-existent. I was wondering. He trailed off. Here it was. The first real test of our new boundaries. You were wondering if I could help with rent. Just this once, he said quickly. I've already got some interviews lined up, and I should have something within a few weeks. I wouldn't ask, but I'm kind of desperate here. 6 months ago, I would have immediately offered to transfer the money without hesitation. But now, I paused to consider the situation more carefully. Miguel, how much is your rent? $1,800. But I've got about $400 saved, so I need $1,400 to cover it. And when is it due? Friday. I did some quick math. Today was Tuesday, which gave him 3 days to find alternative solutions. Have you talked to your landlord about a payment plan or extension? Not yet. I was hoping I wouldn't have to. What about Mom and Dad? Or Sophia? There was a pause. Mom and Dad are still paying off some credit card debt from before we set up the new boundaries. And Sophia's between projects right now. I recognized the pattern immediately. When Miguel needed money, I was still the first call, not the last resort. Despite our family conversations about boundaries and equal treatment, old habits were proving difficult to break. Miguel, I appreciate that you're in a tough spot, but this feels like we're falling back into old patterns. Have you actually explored other options, or did you call me first because it's easier? I called you because you're my sister and I trust you, he said, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. And I want to help you because you're my brother. But helping doesn't always mean immediately writing a check. So you're saying no? I'm saying let's explore all the options before jumping to the nuclear option. Have you applied for unemployment benefits? I started the application today, but it'll take weeks to process. What about side work? Rideshare driving, delivery apps, freelance marketing consulting? I guess I could look into that stuff, but it won't generate $1,400 by Friday. Probably not. I agreed. But it might generate enough to combine with a payment plan from your landlord. Have you actually called them yet? Another pause.
No.
Miguel, I'm going to make you a deal. If you spend tomorrow exploring every other option, unemployment applications, side work, talking to your landlord, asking friends for temporary work, and you still can't come up with a solution, then we can talk about me helping. But I want to see that you've exhausted other possibilities first. That's not how emergencies work, Rachel. I can't just magically generate money in 24 hours. You're right, emergencies don't wait for convenient timing. But you've known for several months that your job wasn't secure. You mentioned performance issues. Did you prepare for this possibility at all? The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Miguel spoke, his voice tight with frustration. So, you're basically saying I brought this on myself. I'm saying that part of growing up is anticipating potential problems and having backup plans. I'm not judging you for getting laid off. That happens to lots of people. But I am questioning whether this is truly an emergency or a consequence of not planning ahead.
Wow.
Okay. I guess I know where I stand with you now. Miguel. Wait, but he had already hung up. I sat staring at my phone, a familiar knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Had I been too harsh? Was I abandoning my brother when he genuinely needed help? Or was I finally holding him accountable for his own choices? I called Maya to get her perspective. You did the right thing, she said after I explained the conversation. You offered to help if he exhausted other options first. That's completely reasonable. But what if he can't find another solution? What if he gets evicted? Then you can help him find temporary housing while he gets back on his feet. But Rachel, you can't keep rescuing people from the consequences of their own choices. Miguel is 22 years old. He needs to learn how to handle crises without immediately running to his sister. That night, I lay awake wondering if I was becoming too cold, too focused on boundaries at the expense of compassion. But when I really examined my motivations, I realized that helping Miguel avoid consequences wouldn't actually help him in the long run. It would just reinforce his belief that someone else would always be there to bail him out. The next day passed without any communication from Miguel. I resisted the urge to text him, instead focusing on work and trying to trust that he was exploring other options as we had discussed. Thursday morning, Mom called. Rachel, honey, Miguel told me about your conversation yesterday. I'm a little concerned about how you handled it. What did he tell you? That he's about to be evicted and you refuse to help him. I felt a familiar surge of frustration. That's not what happened, Mom. I told him I'd help if he explored other options first. Did he mention that part? Well, he said something about jumping through hoops, but sweetie, he's your brother. Sometimes family needs to come first, before pride or principles. This isn't about pride, Mom. It's about Miguel learning to handle his own problems instead of immediately expecting me to fix them. But what if he really gets evicted? Then we'll help him figure out temporary housing and a plan to get back on his feet. But I'm not going to prevent him from experiencing the natural consequences of not planning ahead. There was a pause. I think you're being a little harsh, honey. This isn't like you. Actually, Mom, this is exactly like me. The new me, the one who has boundaries and expectations. Remember our conversation after Costa Rica? That was different. That was about including you in family decisions. No, it was about treating me with respect and not taking advantage of my generosity. This is the same thing. After we hung up, I realized that our family's progress was more fragile than I had hoped. When faced with a real test, Mom immediately reverted to the old pattern of expecting me to solve Miguel's problems without question. That afternoon, I received a text from Sophia. Hey, heard about Miguel's situation. I think you should just help him. It's not that much money for you. I stared at the message, feeling increasingly isolated. It seemed like everyone in my family still expected me to be the perpetual problem solver, despite our previous conversations about boundaries and equal treatment. I decided to call a family meeting for Saturday morning. If we were going to backslide into old patterns at the first sign of difficulty, we needed to address it directly. Friday evening, Miguel texted me. Talk to my landlord. He'll accept half payment now and half in 2 weeks if I can provide proof of income. Got approved for unemployment. Should get first payment in 10 days. Also signed up for DoorDash. Made $47 today. Don't need your money after all. I felt a complex mix of relief and vindication. Miguel had found solutions when he was forced to look for them. But I also felt sad that it had taken a crisis and family pressure for him to take initiative. Saturday morning, we all gathered at my parents' house. The atmosphere was tense, reminiscent of our post-Costa Rica conversations. I want to talk about what happened this week with Miguel, I began, because I feel like we're slipping back into old patterns. Miguel handled his situation, Dad said gruffly. Problem solved. The problem isn't solved if we haven't learned anything from it, I replied. Miguel called me first when he needed money, before exploring any other options. When I asked him to try other solutions first, he hung up on me and complained to the rest of you about my response. You were kind of harsh, Sophia said defensively. Was I? I offered to help if he exhausted other options first. How is that harsh? Because sometimes people need immediate help, Mom said. Sometimes you can't wait for someone to jump through hoops. But he did find other solutions when he was motivated to look for them, I pointed out. He got unemployment benefits, found side work, and negotiated with his landlord. All things he could have done before calling me. Miguel, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. I called you because I was scared and didn't know what else to do. I understand that, I said gently. But Miguel, you're 22 years old. You need to develop problem-solving skills that don't depend on me being your first line of defense. So, what? I'm just supposed to figure everything out on my own? You're supposed to try to figure things out on your own first, and then ask for help if you genuinely can't find solutions. There's a big difference. This is what I was afraid of, Mom said, shaking her head. All this talk about boundaries is making you cold and unsympathetic. Mom, there's nothing cold about expecting a grown man to explore his options before asking for a bailout. In fact, it's the most loving thing I can do because it helps him develop independence and confidence. Easy for you to say, Sophia interjected. You've always had your life together. Not everyone is as naturally responsible as you are. I wasn't born responsible, I said firmly. I became responsible because I had to. Because no one else was going to solve my problems for me. Miguel will never develop those skills if we keep rescuing him from every difficulty. Dad cleared his throat. Maybe there's a middle ground here. Miguel, you should have tried other options first. Rachel, maybe you could have been more supportive in how you said it. It was a diplomatic response, but it missed the point entirely. Dad, this isn't about tone or communication style. It's about fundamental expectations. Do we expect Miguel to take responsibility for his own life, or do we expect me to keep solving his problems? It's not that simple, Mom said. Family helps family. Family should help family, I agreed. But help should be mutual, and it should encourage growth, not dependence. Over the past 3 years, I've given this family over $20,000 in various forms of help. How much has anyone given me? You don't need help, Miguel said. You've got everything figured out. I don't need financial help because I've learned to plan ahead and live within my means. But I need emotional support, I need to feel valued, and I need to know that my well-being matters as much as everyone else's. When you immediately expect me to solve your problems without even trying to solve them yourself, it sends the message that my role in this family is to be a resource, not a person. The room fell quiet. I could see them processing what I had said, and I could see the resistance in their faces. Change was hard, and it was easier to fall back into familiar patterns than to do the difficult work of building healthier relationships. So, what do you want from us? Sophia asked finally. I want Miguel to apologize for hanging up on me and complaining about my response instead of trying the solutions I suggested. I want all of you to stop automatically assuming I'll solve family financial problems. And I want us to have a real conversation about what mutual support looks like in this family. I'm sorry I hung up on you, Miguel said after a moment. And I'm sorry I called Mom to complain instead of trying to solve the problem myself first. It was a start. Not perfect, but genuine. I'm sorry too, Mom added. I did assume you should just help Miguel without question. I wasn't thinking about your perspective. Sophia remained silent, but Dad nodded slowly. Maybe we do rely on you too much for financial stuff. It's just become such a habit. Habits can be changed, I said. But only if we all commit to changing them. We spent the next hour talking about specific ways to build more balanced relationships. Miguel committed to building an emergency fund and exploring all other options before asking for family help. Mom and Dad agreed to stop automatically turning to me when financial issues arose. Sophia reluctantly admitted that she needed to take more responsibility for her own financial stability as an adult. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was progress. More importantly, it demonstrated that our new family dynamic could survive testing and even grow stronger through conflict. 6 months later, Miguel got promoted to a team lead position at a new company. When he told us the news at Sunday dinner, he made a point of mentioning that he had built up a 3-month emergency fund and was contributing to his 401k. I realized that always having a safety net made me careless about planning ahead, he said. Having to solve my own problems actually made me more confident and proactive. Mom beamed at him. We're so proud of how you've grown up this year. I smiled, feeling genuinely proud of my brother's progress. But I also noticed something that would have gone unremarked in our old family dynamic. Mom's praise for Miguel's growth came easily and publicly, while my role in encouraging that growth went unacknowledged. It means a lot to me that Miguel learned to advocate for himself, I said. I was scared that pushing him to find his own solutions would damage our relationship, but it actually made us closer. Rachel's right, Miguel said. I was mad at her at first, but she was doing the hard thing because she cared about me, not because she didn't want to help. It was a small moment, but significant. Miguel had learned to appreciate boundaries instead of resenting them. And for the first time, my role in his growth was being acknowledged and valued. As we cleared the dinner dishes together, Sophia approached me in the kitchen. I've been thinking about what you said about mutual support, she said quietly. I realized I've never really asked how you're doing or what you need. I've just assumed you're always fine. I appreciate you saying that, I said. So I'm asking now. How are you doing? What do you need from us? It was such a simple question, but I couldn't remember the last time anyone in my family had asked it. "I'm doing well," I said. "But it would mean a lot to me if you asked more often. And if you celebrated my achievements the way you celebrate everyone else's." "Like what achievements?" "I mean, I know you're successful, but I don't always know the details." I realized that my family's lack of awareness about my life wasn't entirely their fault. I had become so accustomed to being overlooked that I had stopped sharing important things with them. "I got promoted to senior marketing manager last month," I said. "And I'm leading the company's biggest campaign launch next quarter." Sophia's eyes widened. "Rachel, that's huge. Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I've learned not to expect much reaction, so I stopped trying." "That's terrible. And it's our fault." She hugged me impulsively. "Congratulations. I want to hear all about it." As I told Sophia about my promotion, my new responsibilities, and my excitement about the upcoming campaign, I realized that our family healing wasn't just about setting boundaries. It was also about rebuilding connection and learning to see each other as whole people rather than the roles we had fallen into. That night, Mom posted on social media for the first time about one of my achievements. The photo was from dinner, showing Miguel and me laughing together in the kitchen. The caption read, "So proud of my daughter Rachel for her big promotion to senior marketing manager. Her dedication and hard work inspire our whole family." And equally proud of Miguel for his new position and his growth this year. Watching my children support each other and thrive makes my heart full. #ProudMom, #family, #growth. It was a small gesture, but it represented something much larger. The beginning of a family dynamic where everyone's achievements mattered, where support was mutual, and where my value wasn't measured solely by what I could provide for others. The journey toward healthier family relationships isn't linear. There are setbacks, moments of doubt, and times when it feels easier to revert to old patterns. But each challenge also presents an opportunity to reinforce new boundaries and deepen understanding. Standing up to my family about the Costa Rica trip had been the catalyst for change, but the real work happened in the months and years that followed. It happened in difficult conversations, in moments of choosing discomfort over convenience, and in the gradual rebuilding of trust and respect. If you're in a similar situation with your own family, I want you to know that change is possible, but it requires patience, consistency, and courage. You might face resistance, guilt trips, and accusations of being selfish or cold. But if you stay committed to your boundaries while remaining open to connection, you can build relationships that honor everyone's worth and dignity. The goal isn't to punish anyone or to prove a point. The goal is to create space for everyone to grow, to love, and to be loved in return. Sometimes that requires disrupting unhealthy patterns, even when it's scary and painful. Your family might surprise you. They might rise to meet your new expectations and discover strengths they didn't know they had. Or they might not, and you'll have to decide how much dysfunction you're willing to accept in your life. Either way, you deserve relationships built on mutual respect, genuine care, and shared responsibility. Don't let anyone convince you that wanting those things makes you selfish. It makes you human, and it makes you worthy of love that doesn't come with strings attached. Thank you for joining me on this continued journey. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about family dynamics and personal growth, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find the courage to change their own situation. Most importantly, remember that you have the power to write a different ending to your story. It might not be easy, but it's always possible.